Welcome back. So second half of the week starts out with Jeff working on this first elevator here. He's just cleaning up the trailing edge there where it was bonded together, and then that one's pretty much done. And I'm still back working at the back of the fuselage here in the engine compartment and starting to put all the different bits and pieces back together that I had to take off in preparation for setting up the firewall for putting the fiber fracks, and then ultimately this gold reflective covering on there. So what I'm doing there right now is just installing one of those little sort of U-channel or C-channel brackets there that helps support the engine mount, and there's a hard point behind there for that one, and then this basically connects to or supports a big sort of tie rod there that goes down to the rear part of the engine mount. And I'm just eyeballing it there going, have I got it up the right way or not? I'm not sure. And then I looked at it and I said, yep, that's up the right way. So just had to tighten up the bolts on that, and then that's the last time that one is coming out of there. And then I can get on to doing the one on the other side. So there's quite a few things that need to be bolted back up there to the firewall, so you're going to see a little bit of that moving forward. I'm still looking at that going, I'm not sure if I got it up the right way, but I actually did, so I didn't have to take it out again. But anyway, it's exciting to actually again be putting things on that I know are not going to have to come off again, because up until now a lot of the things have just been test fitting, as you do when you're doing something like this, and then ultimately it has to come off for a paint or something else like that. Anyway, I got that one done, as you can see, and just tightening that one up, and then move on to the next one. And then I had, had the various fuel pumps that were behind there. They were all bolted through. I had the ECU that needed to be bolted on. I had the solenoids that operate the valves there for allowing turbo boost pressure there to go into the cabin. They had to be bolted through. And then I had things like the AC line bulkhead sort of through holes there. There's one for the inlet and one for the return for the AC. And then I also had to work around the hoses there for the heater core. So a bunch of different things to do. And so under here now I'm just tightening up the bolts there for the first of the solenoids that is the one that switches the allows the air to flow from the turbo through into the cabin. There's two of those because if you've been following along, we're allowing it to feed air from two different stages of the turbo setup, so one being the hotter and the other one being the cooler after the intercooler. And then again, if you've been following along, this is a little Arduino box there that does all the controlling for those solenoids. So those bolts had to go back through, and obviously you're looking inside the baggage compartment right now on the left side of the aircraft, and I'm just making sure all those holes are clear, because when I painted on that fiber frac sort of glue, it had a tendency to sort of block the holes there. So I had to re-find all the holes, and again when I put the gold shield on there, it basically blocked all the holes up. And while that's all going on, Devon's been working on getting this hinge sorted out for the intake scoop. So that's the tray that's sitting on top, and then the scoop that's sitting on the bottom, so everything's kind of inverted right now. And so he's making up that hinge for that and adding some extra bracing. And here I'm actually bolting this in place now. And Dan had put this ground wire in that was running from the other side of this, sort of in the engine compartment, over to the engine block, and it was really awkward when the engine was in there to try and connect that ground wire to this thing. So I rerouted it after I basically bolted all this up here. I stopped and I was like, you know what, it'd be much better if I reroute that. So there you can see there's a brown wire there coming from the bottom right corner screw there, and that's the new reroute. And so there's the ground there that's coming through, and that just grounds the two solenoids, but now I don't have to try and connect that up to the engine when it's in anymore, which is awkward. So that was an advantage. And then this is the little pressure sensor, and that Dan installed for us a while back, and that's basically just to pick up ambient air pressure, and that's just one thing that just reads into the ECU and displays, so we'll kind of know what the air pressure is outside, given that we're hoping to go up to decent altitudes. And the little Arduino controller reads that as well and uses that to determine what altitude we're at, and based upon that it figures out what pressure the cabin should be at, and decides how much or how often and which solenoids there to open up to allow air into the cabin. And obviously there's a pressure sensor there at the back of the cabin that the Arduino is also reading, and so it knows the outside pressure and it knows the cabin pressure, and it can figure out exactly what it needs to do in terms of routing air in and out. And obviously with the cabin leaking, which is supposed to do, you're going to get some turnover, which you want. You need fresh air coming in there, and the Arduino will just compensate for that and make sure that it's turning over enough air, so you get fresh air in the cabin. And so with that side of the firewall done, I moved over to the other side, and so this is the baggage compartment on the right hand side, and I'm just using a little scribe tool there just to poke holes in through that glue, and again it goes right through the gold reflective tape thing, whatever you want to call it, heat shield, and just marks where all those holes are on the other side, so then I can actually just push it through from the other side and widen it out, and ultimately just put the bolts back through again. So these are the mounting points now for the two fuel pumps, the regular fuel pump for the engine, and the other one that runs the fuel through the heat exchanger. And of course there's another mounting point up the top there for the fuel filter. So those are all the holes there on this side, and so you can kind of see where there's a few of them come through. Just got to find them there and make them a little bit wider, and then ultimately put the bolts in there. So after having got those done, I moved on to this one. Is a little Garmin GEA24, the engine analyzer unit, which accepts all the different connections from the engine and displays them on the G3X display. So right now we're just using that for fuel level and also for fuel flow. You could hook up all sorts of other stuff, but because we have the Motec ECU displaying most of the stuff, I just decided to just basically use the Garmin stuff for the fuel. And the advantage for that is that I can have an accurate display there of fuel remaining and range and all that sort of stuff right on the Garmin display without having to look over on the Motec for that. So anyway, just putting the bolts in there to get that one remounted, and I think that's pretty much finishes off everything in the baggage compartment side of things with respect to putting the bolts back through into the engine bay compartment. And so while I was doing this, I had also put through those AC bulkhead pass-throughs the way I had mentioned earlier, and I remembered that I still had to lubricate the O-rings on all those fittings there and get those done also on the engine. So I quickly went over to the engine and said, oh, it's time to do this. So looked at the AC lines that were all plugged in, and none of them had O-rings on them or anything, or at least some of them didn't. So that one there, I went and found the O-rings for that, and this was a little fitting that Dan got sorted out when he was here, and sort of like a reuse that we got from a different Audi, but to fit the AC unit that we have, or the compressor. So the compressor we have is brand new. I had to get that because we couldn't actually get the right one that we needed for our engine that had the right pulley offset, so I just ordered that one way back when, and had the O-rings all this time. So I just put that O-ring on there and put a little of the lubrication oil on there. And I know I probably should have lubricated the O-ring before I put it on, but I wanted to test fit it, and then of course when it went on, it's quite a large groove in that thing. I was like, well, if I try and take it off again now, I'll probably damage it, so I'll just put some extra lubrication oil on there and then bolt that into place on the compressor. So there was just a couple of different places on the engine where there were fittings with O-rings that are currently the hoses are currently connected there, and there's a couple of others that still will need to be connected when we refit the engine. So I did the ones that were already there, so it was the two going in and out of the compressor, and there was one that goes into the condenser, So I put the O-ring on that and put some oil on it, lubrication on there, and tighten that fitting up. And then the two that were coming through the rear of the fuselage onto the bulkhead pass-through on the firewall there, I've connected those two fittings as well, put the O-rings in there and lubricated those as well, so those are done. So what's remaining there is when the engine mounts back up, I've got the two that are on the firewall there, and one of them runs up to the dryer, and before I put the dryer in, the new dryer, I want to make sure I only put it in the very end and not give it time to be exposed to the ambient air for any length of time. So right before I actually put that in, I'll connect up the hoses and lines and stuff to that with the O-rings and get that all sorted out. So then that'll be the air conditioning, and I've already programmed the Motec ECU now to take in an input switch from the AC unit up in the cabin to tell the AC to come on, and then the Motec basically sees that trigger switch through that relay setup that I showed you there, I think last time or the time before, and it detects that we want the AC to come on, and it uses the pulse width modulation, I think that's what you call it, coming out of the ECU to control the compressor to make it work on and off sort of variable, because it's the newer style one, whereas the old one, just the old style compressors just had a clutch, and you just basically put 12 volts or ground them or whatever, how they were configured, and the clutch would engage and then it'd be working. But these new ones are more variable, so you can adjust them for how much power they're putting out, how much compression they're putting out. And here's Jeff and Devon, so they're closing out the second one of the elevators there now. So this is the last now control surface that's getting closed out, and really that just leaves to be closed out the foreplane. And there's a few more things that need to happen in there before we can close it out, but we're not far off. So it's getting exciting, and Jeff started doing some of the body work on parts of the wings and fuselage now, just so we don't have a big pile of it to do at the end. And that's what that elevator there looks like, with some weights and clamps holding it together, and just for convenience we just use the mold in there to put it in there, and that keeps it nice and straight so it doesn't have any twist in it. And so this is what the engine compartment looks like now that I've got everything, I'll say, tidied up. Still looks a little bit messy, but there's a lot of wiring coming out of that the ECU down there, but I've got it all now with the wire wrap on there. Actually, this is before I had actually completely finished it. Just wanted to show you sort of progress. So most of the stuff's bolted in there, but yeah, you'll see another bit in a minute. And that little fuel valve in there, that's going to be safety wired open before we go flying. Don't worry about that. So what I'm doing here now is just tidying up the last of this, the connectors and the wiring harness there that goes in and out of the ECU, and just putting a little bit of electrical tape around the that wiring sleeve, whatever you want to call it, just to make sure it's not going to fall off or whatever, and the wires inside of them aren't exposed anymore, and just trying to make it tidy. There's a lot of wires and stuff there, but modern engine, but anyway, this is what it looks like when it is all done now. So it's as tidy as I can have it before the engine goes back in, and those heater lines will just sort of drop down there. Just hung them up so they're not dragging on the floor. But yeah, you can see I've tidied up the wiring harness as much as I can. That red wire there goes to the starter. There's the AC lines coming through there. They're just blocked up right now, and the main power next to that. And then the rest of the harness sitting on the top there, that all goes over the top of the engine, to the injectors and the various different sensors. So it's not really that complicated. It looks like it, but it's not. And so here's Devon working some more on that hinge. So he actually had to create some backing plates out of 4130 just to sort of beef that up so it wouldn't pull out. And he's put some nut plates and stuff on there as well. And Jeff's been working on getting ready to close out the foreplane. So he's got a final, well, I wouldn't say final, but close to test fit on the lower skin there on the right-hand side. And it's been notched out and stuff to fit around the hinges there. And now I got the engine stuff sorted out. I'm back in the cabin and working on getting the center console installed and everything fitted into that. So I've got the AC vents coming through there, and I've got the cabin dump valve that sits in the center there. There's a whole bunch of things, but the first thing I had to do here, which I didn't have yet, was to create some anchor points so I can bolt down the back part of that center console so it doesn't lift up, if you hit any sort of negative G's or whatever. So I just got a little bit of angle aluminum there and just sort of taped it into place, and then just match drilled it right through the cantilever seat mounts there, and just put some bolts through there, and then just dropped it down on top of it, and drilled out the holes there to match. And so that one's done. And so now I'm working on getting all the wiring and stuff to the back end of the center console, and these are the headphone jacks there, and also the power there for that USB outlet. So here you can see I've got all that done. So we've got the two different vents there, that basically just one feed that wires off there, so you got a little bit of cool and heat in the back. And inside the console there, you've got the cabin dump valve, the gear dump valve there, so you'd open that in emergency if the gear doesn't go down. And then on the back there, I also had the headphones and stuff hooked up that I said. And so there's Devon's hinge that he's done there, so that thing is pretty solid now. I'm not worried about the intake scoop coming away from the tray at the back. And the front part's going to be hooked up to this linear actuator, and you'll see that coming next week. And meanwhile, Jeff also got this the trim tab there for the aileron, and it's only just one on one side. He's got that installed completely now, and with the little access panel on top, you see he's got little flathead screws there with Tinnerman washers to hold all the hinges in place, and a little access panel there on the top for where the trim motor is in behind there. And I can just flip that off there because he doesn't have any screws in there yet. And there's the little motor controller. It's one of the Ray Allen controllers, and you've seen this before, but it's kind of nice for people who are just sort of tuning in, haven't seen all this, they can see what we've got in there. And a little Deutsch connector in there for hooking that up. And so back in the cabin now, sitting kind of in the back on the seat rails. There's no seats in there right now. I took them out just because it's easier to work in there without them. So I got that center console all put in now and bolted down, so that's not coming out. And everything seems to be working nicely with the throttles and all that sort of stuff. And so here I'm just setting up now to put in the right side display again and bolt that into place. So it's sitting over there right now. So it's kind of cool closing out all the stuff there in the cabin. And here's Devon's little hinge thing now, so he's actually bolted it, and Mark wanted us to bond it into place as well onto the back wall of the intake scoop. So that's happening, and the holes have already been drilled in the intake tray, so all we have to do now is just put the bolts through there onto those nut plates that he put in there, and then that's that job done. And then we'll hook up the front part of it. So here I'm putting the little Allen bolts all the way around this that carbon sort of back plate, or what do you want to call it, dash part there that the G3X on the right hand side sits in, and just screwing all those in. And again, I fabricated this a long time ago, and a lot of those, most of those threads in the aluminum there are just being tapped, so just being careful when I put them in to not mess up the threads. It's a bit late in the game to be doing stupid stuff like that, so just got to be careful and get that in. Of course, I just hooked up. It only has actually has an antenna hooked up to the back of that display, and also just the one big connector. So I got all that hooked up, and the vent line as well. That's the AC vent that's on that side, and got that all screwed into place. And then the center section, I haven't put that in yet. That's just going to be the big carbon panel there with the sticky back stuff that has the iPad and also the Windows tablet for the Motec stuff. And apparently we won't be running ForeFlight on the iPad for very long. It sounds like we're moving to Android because of Boeing. Anyway, so here's both of the elevators there now, after having been closed out. And Jeff's gone and actually just put some sort of tape fill and and I think micro or whatever over the seam there, so they can be done. And back in the cabin, now that I got everything hooked up, I can repower it all and make sure it's all working. And I noticed there that the gear lever was showing red and the two mains were showing red, and I was like, well, why is that? Because the gear is locked down. So I went back in and was reading the documentation. Apparently if the gear lever was up, it's not, even if the gear magnet switches are closed, it's going to show red, thinking it's in transition state. So I came back out and I was like, oh, the gear lever needs to be down because the gear's down, and I actually had it up there, and I went and actually put it down, and right when I did that, it basically triggered the gear, and the wiring, I think, and I still haven't had a chance to check it yet, the wiring was reversed, and this happened, and boom, the whole thing just basically collapsed down on two legs, and the door hit me in the head because I was standing in the door when I did that, and it just basically fell down. It was just like, what is going on? This whole thing is just coming down. And so I was a little bit in shock, and because the other guys were at lunch when I did this, and so that's what it looked like. The one gear stayed locked in with the over center mechanism holding it there. The other one retracted. Fortunately, it fell on that drum a little bit. Didn't really do any damage there. But anyway, we got it back up on the blocks there. Used the forklift to pick it up, and as you can see in the background, we've disassembled the CNC machine that's going into storage while we're doing flight testing and such. Unfortunately, the only thing that was real damage there was when that gear collapsed there, it broke this little weld down in here on that tube for the retraction arm. So I'm going to have to, Mark's already figuring out what we're going to do there, whether we're just going to fix that or whether we need to beef it up. But it was, quite a bit of stress when it went down on that. So anyway, as the video title says, it's not how many times you fall down, but how many times you get up. So it's back up sort of on its feet. It is on blocks because I don't trust that nose gear right now until we get that welded up, but everything else is okay. So yeah, if you liked that video, and how could you not with that sort of drama in the end, please give it a thumbs up, and tune in again next week and see what other kind of damage I can get up to. Thanks again for watching.